Okay, so first, a few things. So anytime you join a company, most of the times you will have, there is a code base, and the code base is pretty much where your team will be interacting with that code. In the sense, you will be modifying some code, somebody else will be modifying some other code, and so on. So there needs to be a central place where you need to have all these code location and so on. Okay, so if let's say if I modify the file, somebody else wants my changes, right? So he cannot just come to my directory and take the files because I may be in the middle of modifications, some other things and so on. So once my changes are done, I will indicate to others that my changes are ready. And that indication is pretty much like I'm going to take my files and I'm going to push it. Push it means from my local machine to the remote machine. Okay, so that remote machine or a remote location or a server is github.com. Okay, so what you're looking at right now is one of the repository. There are other repositories also. There is SVN, which is the old version. There is IBM ClearCase. There is GitLab and other tools and so on. But pretty much they're all kind of like very familiar, very similar and so on. So one of them is a github.com. Okay. So this is a tool that we're gonna try to learn here. So first I'm gonna create a project here. You guys don't have to create a project. So I'm gonna create this as a demo project. Okay? And I'm gonna make this public so you guys can actually access the files and all that. Okay. So that is as simple as just logging in and creating a repository and so on. Okay. So now you can see that there's a repository called as demo project. Okay, right now there are no files in there, but pretty much you can see it gives me some commands here. Okay, so we're gonna look at what those commands mean and all that. Okay, so first there are two options. Whenever you create a Git repository, or for every Git repository, there are two options. One is HTTPS and there's SSH link option. Okay, so we will go with HTTPS for now, but we will go with so we will go with HTTPS option for now, but you can also use SSH option. It's up to you what you want to use. If you want to use SSH, there has to be some keys that have to be set up. There's a private key, public key kind of stuff. For now, just I'm going to go with HTTPS. There is no additional setup that requires here. Okay. So I'm going to give you this link also. But first, I want to show you guys what are the things that we can do here. Okay. Okay. All right. So here I'm going to open up my WSL, which is Windows Subsystem for Linux, and hopefully you guys install this. If not, then you can also open up a Windows command line, command prompt. Okay. And from here, if you have Git installed, you can run the Git command, and you should see these options here. Okay. That's another option that you can try also. Okay. So on the Windows command prompt, you may have to install this Git, but if not, the best thing is running through Windows Subsystem for Linux. Okay, this is something that I indicated in the previous sessions that to install this particular software. But if you don't have that, you can also download something called as Git Bash. Okay, so these are all the command line utilities that help you interact with the GitHub.com. Okay, so you can actually say Git Bash download, and yeah. So let me give you this so that. So this is optional. If you have Windows Subsystem for Linux, you don't need this Git Bash. But if you don't have this Windows Subsystem for Linux, then you need this Git Bash. Okay. So pretty much you want to interact with the GitHub.com. Okay. So, and we are going to interact using command line, because command line is always more powerful than other user interface, interface tools and so on. Okay. All right. So remember, I copied this project. Right. I copied this project repository URL. Okay. So I copied that, and there is also a button here, so you can also click on this, and it will copy. Same thing. Okay. So I'm gonna go here, and over here I'm gonna run a command called git. Hopefully you guys can see the font. If not, maybe I can increase it. Yeah, looks like there's no option to increase. Yeah, can you guys see the font here? Okay, 1 second. Looks like you didn't copy. Okay. Okay. Oh, there you go. All right. So Windows Subsystem for Linux, you need to right click to paste it. Okay. So anyways, so we running this command called git clone. Okay. So what it's going to do right now, it's going to get me the remote repository. So right now I have a repository on github.com. Okay. It's not in my local computer. Okay. Now what I'm doing is I'm getting the remote repository into my local computer. Okay. So I'm going to hit enter. Permission denied. Could not create. Okay. So I'm going to create a directory here. Okay. So I'm going to go to probably document folder or somewhere. Okay. So I created a folder called as demo project. Okay. So hopefully you guys can see that. So over here, I'm going to run this git clone command. Okay. So this is the first command that we're going to run, which is git clone. Okay. So what this is going to do, and you can see it says could not resolve proxy.global.com. Okay, so let's not use this from here. So let me use a Git Bash. I think this is this is connecting to my office computer. So here, all right. So so here I'm going to create a folder. All right. So here I have a folder called as demo project. Okay. So I'm inside that folder right now. And over here, I'm going to do git clone. Okay. So I'm going to do git clone. It is going to a different proxy, and it's complaining about that proxy. So let me uncheck that proxy for a second. But I want you guys to run the same command. Okay? So you guys should not get that error. So that is our repository location. So I want you to run git clone that repository URL. Okay. So when you run this command, it should be able to get the remote repository into your local computer. Okay. So try that out while I resolve this error. And if you face any issues, let me know. Okay, fine. So what we're going to do is There's a proxy that is blocking me right now, going to external github.com. But in your case, it should work. So maybe one of you guys can probably share your screen. So when you run the Git Clone command, you should be able to clone that remote repository. Yeah, I was trying to see how to increase the font here, but okay. So this window works. Yeah, let me check for proxy settings. Remove the proxy settings. Yes, so for now, I'm gonna, yeah, so I am facing this issue because I have a proxy that is preventing me from connecting to external github.com. But are you guys able to clone it? And so if you run that command, git clone and the URL, which I pasted in the previous message. So if you run this whole command, git clone, the same, you should be able to see that it is able to clone and everything. So maybe one of you can share your screen and show me that git clone is able to run successfully and all that. Maybe Akshay, you wanna go ahead?
Vasu, can you please paste that link one more time, that
Yeah.
HTTPS one?
Yeah, I pasted in the chat here, go to meeting chat.
Oh yeah, perfect.
The whole command, git clone and whatever the URL and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, I will go ahead and share my screen.
Okay, thanks.
You might need to stop it.
Oh yeah.
Stop the screen share.
We think I have to make you presenter. Okay. So hopefully you guys can see Akshay's screen here. So what he's running there is the git clone command, and that has cloned that particular repository. It says that it's an empty repository, but still it's able to clone it. Okay. Now if you do ls command, yeah, there should be a demo project directory. I can see a demo.
Yeah.
Yep. So that is created just now. Okay. So it's an empty repository. Okay. So let's add a file there. Okay. So let's say you are working on this project and you are modifying some files or you're adding some files and so on. Okay. Now run a command called touch, Touch, and maybe you can put your name, akshay.txt, whatever. Yeah. Okay. So now if you do ls, there is a file called akshay.txt. Okay. You can put some contents. Maybe you can say echo. Echo is pretty much is going to print. Echo A, B, C, D, whatever. Put in double quotes.
Even the echo should be in double quotes?
No, echo should be in without double quotes. And A, B, C, D. And close and put an angle bracket, which is a greater than symbol. Yep. Angle bracket is, this, let me give you the command. So you can say echo So I pasted there in the chat window. So what we are trying to do is we are putting some contents into the file. So this can be any file. It can be a Python file, text file, or it can be a C++ file or so on. Okay. Now if you do ls or less, cat is yeah. So now you can see there is some contents in the file akshay.txt. Okay. Now this file is local to this repository demo project. But if you do git status, yes, right. So here you can see when you are running git status command, it is showing all the files that were added, modified, everything that got changed. Okay. So here it says at the bottom here that you can see untracked files. Okay. So you can see that that means you added some files, but you haven't taken any action in there in the sense that you are not adding to the repository or anything. Okay. So you can add 10 files, but you're not adding to the repository yet. Okay. So can you do git add and akshay.txt?
Yeah.
Okay. Now do git status. All right. So now you can see the red. It used to be the file used to be in red color, akshay.txt. Now it became green color. Okay. Now and also it says that it's a new file. Okay. What happened here is before the file was untracked. Untracked means Git didn't care what that file meant. Okay. But after Akshay ran this git add command, that means he's gonna add this file, new file, to the repository. A repository in the sense the next time he does a commit or push, this file will be pushed to the remote repository. Okay. So now git status shows that you added a file. Yes, actually you are supposed to create a branch and do that.
Yeah.
So let's actually do one thing. Let's create a new branch here. So do git checkout -b, and you can say whatever name of the branch you want. Okay. Yeah. So here, what we are doing is git checkout -b pretty much is going to create a new branch and also going to switch to the branch. Okay. So it says that switch to a new branch. Okay. That means this is the name of the branch, and over there we switch to the branch. Okay, so this might be very confusing for newcomers. What is a branch? What is a master branch? What is this, and so on? Okay, so let me share a picture first, and then maybe, or let's try to proceed actually, and then I'm going to come back and show you the big picture. For now, just assume that every change that you make, you are supposed to create a branch, and then you're supposed to make changes in the branch. Okay. Now, can you run git branch here, Akshay? So any command that you are running here should, if you have a git as a prefix, that means you're running a git command. Okay. If you don't have a git prefix, or if you're just doing something like ls command or so on, so these are all local commands. Okay. If you do something like git status, that means you're asking the git. That's a git command. Okay. And here, git branch surprisingly doesn't print anything. Yeah, it's supposed to print that you're on a feature branch and there's a master branch and all that. That's fine. For now, let's ignore that. So let's do git add. You already added the file. Now let's do git commit. Okay, so do git commit -m and put some message saying this is a demo or something like that. Okay. Close the double quotes, hit enter. Okay. So what the commit does is you can make some changes to the files. Okay. So you might have a new file, you might have 10 different files or so on. So you can continue to work on it. You can do git add and all that. And once you're happy with your changes, you're going to do git commit. Okay. So what the git commit does is it commits to your local repository. That means local git. It doesn't commit to the remote repository, which is a github.com. Okay. But if you want to notify the remote repository, you have to do git push. Okay. So that is what we're going to run next. Can you run git push? Say origin, yeah, git push. Let me run this actually. So git push origin, and we're going to run this feature dash Akshay. Okay. So if I run this command, so what it does is it is going to push this particular file or branch to the remote repository. Okay. So it says that permission to denied. Okay. So let's try to enable this. I thought I made this repository public, but let me see.
So Vasu, there is one more thing. It is saying that Git Push set upstream origin feature Akshay. That will work?
It should be the same. Yeah, you can try that.
Okay. No, it's the same.
Yeah, it should be the same. So let me make this remote repository public, and that should solve it. I'm looking into the settings, and okay, so there is an option to restrict editing. I'm removing that option, and okay. I'm going to show this in a minute what I did here, but okay, there is a save option. Yeah, try now actually. Same thing.
No.
Denied. Okay. Permission to deny. Okay. So what I'm trying to demo here is this is how you would be modifying the files. You would be changing your code base, and you would be pushing this code to the remote repository. And GitHub.com is a public repository, and you should be able to push the changes out and all that.
Vasu, if you want, I can just get some HTTPS link from my current GitHub project that I have. So this will not give some remote error because I do have access to it.
No, that's fine. I want others to also do the same thing. So I want them to.
Okay.
So it says, okay.
Hello, my name is Krupa. I just wanted to know that is it just started today? Because I have joined today. I got link only today. So is it in middle or is it just started today?
No, this is a second or third session. So it's not the first session here. And
Okay, just second or third.
sorry.
It's just the second or third session, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, and the first two session. Do we have any recording for that?
Yeah, we do have a recording. I'm gonna send you a link for a YouTube channel, and I usually upload there, and you should be able to go back there and check it out.
Okay, okay, sure. Also, it is a 8 p.m. CST or EST?
It's EST.
CST.
No, EST, Eastern Time.
EST. Okay, that's why I'm late today because I thought it's CST. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. All right. So I'm trying to see how to make this permissions. Okay. So give me 1 second. Okay, so looks like there are two types of accounts. One is a personal account and an organization account. Personal account is something I have to invite others and they should be able to contribute. but an organization account, anybody can contribute. So looks like I created a personal account. So let me invite you guys. Akshay, can you give me your username for the github.com? So I'm going to start sharing my screen so that you guys can see. So I want every one of you to give me your github.com username so I can add you to the repository. Okay, so and let me add others. Akshay, you want to give me your user ID? Oh, okay, thanks. All right. So now all of you should be able to contribute to this remote repository. So Akshay, can you try, let me ask you to share your screen. If you go back to your command line, now you should be able to share your screen. Sorry, now you should be able to push the code.
Yeah, so actually I'm trying that and it is giving me the error.
So it says still feature denied.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Sure.
Yeah, where can I see the repository which you have shared just now?
Sorry, what do you mean very?
Repository?
Oh, you want the URL of the repository?
Yeah, I have given my ID. So through that, you are going to share the repository to our account, or what we can do with that?
Yeah, so you should be able to push your code. So what I'm trying to do here is make you guys get familiar with the GitHub. So you should be able to add some files, add some dummy code or whatever you want. And then you should be able to push your code up to this remote repository. And I wanted to show you the entire workflow of
Okay.
how to create files, how to create branches and everything.
Okay, sir.
So
Thank you.
probably I'll in the next session I'm gonna try to show.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, no. All right. So probably I'm gonna stop it here for the GitHub.com, but I'm gonna continue on this next session. Looks like there are some permissions that I have to look at. That's fine. So I'm gonna come back to this later. So let me start sharing my screen and switch to another topic.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
All right. So, all right. So what happens in a real world is that you might have multiple applications. Okay. The last time we were looking at a few of the code base. Let's say. Yeah. So last time we were looking at how to define a function, how to add dictionaries, and very simple Python stuff. Okay. So let's say there is an application which is like, let's say Amazon.com, or maybe you have some other web server that is running there that is processing some request responses and so on. Okay, and somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, your application is erroring out. I'm getting an error. Can you take a look at why there is an error?" Okay. So they just tell you that there is an error and the application is not working as expected. Can you please take a look at that? Okay, so let's say what happens in real world is that, so you have a server. So I just picked up some random image. So you have a bunch of clients. Okay, clients are pretty much, think of it, we are working for Amazon.com. Okay, so you are an employee of Amazon.com. You have a service that gives the product information. Okay, the product information might be the product price, the product reviews, and all that information. And you have a bunch of clients here. Okay, the clients are pretty much connecting to the server, which is Amazon.com. And when they're connecting, there's not one application server that is running. You have multiple servers that are running behind the scenes. Okay, so in this picture, it shows 3 servers, but it can be 10 servers or 100 servers or maybe 200. Okay, so it can be as many as you configure. But pretty much that you have one server as a load balancer. Okay, that means all the clients are connecting to this guy, which is a load balancer, and the load balancer decides, should I send the request to this guy, the second one, or the third one? Okay, and the way it decides is that it looks at a couple of things. One of them, it looks at how many requests is this server processing. Okay, if this guy is processing 2 requests and this guy is not processing anything, this will send the request to this guy because this is not loaded yet. Okay, so it will try to send the request to this particular server and so on. So it looks at the load of different servers, and then it will send the request to the server that has a less load. Okay, that's why it's called load balancer. Okay, so this guy is pretty lightweight. Light in the sense a request comes in, it doesn't do any processing. It just says, it just decides where it has to send. It has to send this guy or that and so on, and it just forwards a particular request. Okay, so you don't need a very heavy, or in the sense you don't need multiple machines as a load balancer. 1 or 2 machines is fine for load balancer. It goes there, it sends a packet to this guy or that guy, and done. Okay. On the backend side, these guys might be heavy in the sense the application servers. Because they might have to go to database, get the product information, get the price information, get some images, or get some product review and all that. So it has to do a lot of looking up the information and all that, and it has to return that client information. Okay. Now somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I have an error. Can you take a look at that?" Okay. Now there are like thousands of clients that are connecting there, and there are hundreds of servers. Where would you go and look for error, right? So because you have no idea the request is going to this server or that server, which server it's going to. Okay, so we have some tools that can help you. So one of the tool is called Humio. Okay, so this is an open source tool. Hopefully you guys can see this here. So this tool, what it does, it provides a interface here. Okay, so let me go here. Yeah. So it provides kind of like an interface. Let me zoom in. So this is, assume this as a command line interface or something. Okay. So here I said, give me the config file for this service. Don't worry about the service name. I have some service running as this name, RG BVLHSVC or something like that. Okay. So that is the name of the service. Okay. So, and then I did a pipe. Pipe means the output of this is going to be input to this guy. Okay. And then I said group by the cluster name and then sort by the count. Okay. So what it did is there's only one cluster that I'm running on, and this cluster has like 8 machines running there. But pretty much I have 8 servers that are running, and the count is almost what, 2 million something. Okay, so these many number of requests went to that cluster, 2 million, and this is across 48 hours. You can see here it says 48 hours. I'm not sure if you can see here. I can't highlight it, but yeah. So here it says selected as 48 hours. I can go back, reduce the time. I can go to 24 hours, 12 hours, 1 hour, or any of the time period that I want. Or I can even do a custom window, okay, time. So I can even say my own time range, date, time, or so on, okay. So I can select defined presets, or I can select my own custom time, okay. So this tool, what it does is it looks up all the log files and then can look up for any information that you're asking for. So in this case, I said, give me the count, which is aggregate the counts and give me, and it gave me the count. Okay. So let's say somebody's complaining there's an error, and you have to look for error information. Okay. So here I have another query. So it says this is the config log name. Okay. So look for those logs in this cluster. Okay. And look for error. Okay, so there are some errors that are happening. Look for those errors. Okay, so what this does is it looks up the whole cluster, the entire cluster, and tells me these are all the things that have an error. Okay, so here there's an error. You can see this happened 8:20, which is yesterday at 2:13. Okay, so I said here 48 hours. If somebody comes to you and says, I had this error half an hour back or so on, you can change it to appropriate time period. Okay. But yeah, you can see these are the kind of error information. Okay, so it has a file, name of the file, which file this is coming from, what is the line number, what is the error information, and all that. And once I click on that, that gives me more information about exactly which machine this happened on. So you can see that is the name of the host. Okay, so I can go now. I can go to that particular server out of the 100 servers. I know exactly.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you please maximize it?
Yeah, sure. Yep. Is that okay? I even increase the font.
Yeah. It's good. Thank you.
Yeah, if you can't see, let me know. I can increase the font or change the size. Okay, so you can see this is one of the event searching tools, which is open. Yeah, sorry, I don't think this is open source, but it's a pretty cheap tool in the sense compared to other tools, this is inexpensive. And most of the companies use either this or Splunk. There's another tool called Splunk. I got a window for Splunk, but I disconnected from the server and it throws this message. But this is what Splunk looks like. And I'm not sure if you can see in the background, there is a similar search bar and you can enter the similar query that you are looking for. And you should be able to see all the information that you have searched for. This is very similar to the Humio tool that we were looking at. So the first tool that we looked at was Humio, and the second tool that we are looking at is Splunk. Splunk is pretty expensive, and some companies do use this. Yeah, but it's very similar. Both of them are very similar. You can enter a search query. You can enter some search query, and it will look for those information, and it can tell you exactly all the things that match to what you're looking for. Okay. All right. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I have one question. Like, what's the config file contains? Like, what information?
Sorry, what config file are you talking about?
Like when we make any app, there must be a config file, right? Scheduler and like, yeah. So like
Yeah,
what?
Yeah, so before Humio can actually look up this information, so I have to configure Humio to say, look up this file information. So I said just this service name but the service may be logging in some directory, which is different from other locations and so on. So there is some configuration that goes behind the scenes. I did not go into those details because most of the times these tools are set up for you by another team, which is a DevOps team. DevOps actually takes care of installing this, will let you set it up for you and so on. So as a developer, you're not looking into configuring these tools, but you are more interested in searching for those, how to use the tool. Okay. The installation, the configuration of the tool itself will be taken care of by the DevOps. Okay. That's something that we're not going to cover in this session, but that's a good point here.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, so let's move to Python here. So I'm going to come back to other tools in a minute. And yeah, okay. So in the previous session, we were looking at interactive session, which was Python. And we were looking at dictionaries, tuple sets, and those kind of information. So before we jump in there, I just want to ask you guys a few questions to see how many of you remember the previous session topics. Okay, so can somebody tell me what does 400 HTTP status code mean?
Yeah, it is bad user details.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's something wrong with the user request, user information kind of stuff, and so on. That's correct. Yeah. That is 400. Yep. And what does 200 status code mean?
It's OK code, like status OK code.
Yes, that's correct. Yep. It's a success status code. That's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. That's good. So let's move on there. All right. So this time we're going to look at, so we looked at for loops, we looked at dictionaries, tuples, strings, and simple functions and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So we're going to look at a little more advanced, which is how to read a file and what to do with those contents and so on. Okay. So let me create a simple file. Okay. So I'm going to say file, and I'm going to create a text file. Data.txt. Okay, so I'm going to create this data.txt file, and let's say I have a bunch of data. Okay, so let's say I have city name. I'll increase the font here. Okay, population. Let's say there are only 2 columns in this file. Okay, and I'm going to name this as New York, and population is what of New York? 7.5 million something. Yes, so I'm going to put 7.5 million. Okay, and let's say San Francisco. And let's, I don't know the population, but I'm going to just name it as 4 million. Okay. 4 million. Okay. Let's say these are the contents of the file. Okay. So let's say you have this file, which is the city, what is the population of that city, and so on. Okay. And how do you get this data in Python? Now, I have a Python code here. Okay. I want to get the file contents. I want to read the contents in Python. Okay. So it's very simple in Python. So I can do is f equal to, I'm going to open that file. Okay. So open data.txt. Okay. Now I opened a file. That's it. To open the file, that's a single line. And then I can say for line in F, for every line in F, print line. Okay. And that is 3 lines of code, how to read a file and how to print the file. Okay. So if I run this file, so at the bottom you can see it actually prints the contents of the file. Okay. So Python makes it much easier for you to read files and manipulate the file information and so on. Okay. So you can see 3 lines of code. You can open up a file, read the contents of the file and so on. If it was Java, C++, or so on, you need to write at least 10 to 20 lines of code. Okay, so this is the power of Python. So I actually skipped a few things, which is once you open a file, you have to close the file. Okay, so you need to do f.close. Okay, so it's a good practice that you open up a file, you have to close the file. Okay, so this is how you will be reading from the file. Okay? But as I did before, usually people forget closing the file. Okay, so there's another way. You don't have to worry about how to close the files and so on. So you can just do this.
Excuse me, sir. I'm not sure if I am the only one who is not able to see the word over here. It's very light. I mean, I can hardly see the words. I'm not sure.
No, on my end, it looks fine.
Hey, you can try to zoom in your screen. I mean, what I did was I tried to zoom in my own screen to look at Vasu's screen. So you try doing that.
Okay.
So I guess it depends on how big your screen is. So if your screen is too small, maybe you may be able to see it.
Sorry, what did you say?
No, I'm telling you, it depends on how big your screen is, because mine is a big monitor, and over there I'm sharing that. So if yours is a small screen, you might have to zoom in and look.
Yeah, actually, it is problem with the word also. It's not like dark. It's very light, very light.
Yeah, there is.
So,
Yeah. There's another setup that I can change. Probably I can change the color scheme here. Probably I'm going to change to dark color. Okay. Is that okay for you guys? Or
yeah, right. It's good.
it's good now?
Thank you. Yeah.
It's called Dracula.
Yeah, it's good now.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to leave it here. So as I was talking before, when you open a file, you have to close the file. Okay. But most of the times, developers forget closing the resources. You might open up a database connection. You're supposed to close the connection, but most of the times we don't do that. So Python, what it does is it has another option, which is a with clause. Okay, so you can say with, and then you can open the file here as F. Okay, and then you do whatever you would want to do with the file, and the with statement will take care of closing the file. Okay, so once you're done with your manipulation, once you come out of that block, it will take care of closing that particular file. So I don't have to explicitly remember to close a file or anything. Okay, so this is called a resource manager. So those are called the resource managers, and you can do you can open up a database connection, you can open up a server connection, a file, or anything. And in the very end, it will take care of closing that connection and all that. Okay, so that's called a resource manager. So if I run this, you're still going to see the same thing. At the bottom, you're going to see the city name and population. Okay. Now let's say that we have another requirement, which is find the city that has the highest population. Okay. So I have only two cities here, New York and San Francisco, but I want to find the city that has the highest population. Okay. So now what we did is we got the whole line itself. Okay. But I want to look at the specific field, which is the second field. Okay. So to get the individual fields, so I can do something like name population equal to line.split on a comma. Okay. So here we did a split. That means we got the whole line, and now we are doing a split on a comma. That means I'm getting the value before the comma, and I'm getting the value after the comma. Okay. So before the first one is name, the second one is population. Okay. So now if I do print population. So that should print just the population value. Okay. So you can see it prints just the second column. Okay, because it's now getting the value after that. Okay. Now, but our use case is to find the maximum population value. Okay, so I'm going to keep track of the maximum. So I'm going to say maximum equal to none. Okay, and I'm going to say if I have a maximum or if I don't have a maximum. Okay, or my maximum is less than this population. That means I found a population that is higher than the maximum. Okay, now I'm going to keep track of that maximum. Okay, so max city name. Okay, so what we are doing here is we are pretty much keeping track of the maximum population, and then in the very end, we're going to print the maximum population city name. Okay, so I'm going to explain the code in a bit. So I just want to show you that. Okay, it's a city name here. That means we have to ignore the first line. Okay, so let's say header. Did we already pass the header? It's a little bit false here. So I'm going to say that we just pass the header for every time, and if you pass header and okay, so you can see that. Okay, let me explain the logic here. So the city with the maximum population or the max population is New York here. But what we did here is we are looping through the file. For every line in that file, we are saying, give me both the name and the population. Okay. And then I'm saying ignore the header. Okay, so this parse header equal false. This pretty much takes care of ignoring the first line. Okay, so if I already looked at the header before, that means this line is a data line. Okay, so if I already looked at that and I don't have a maximum, or if my maximum is less than the population that I just found, I'm keeping track of that. That means I'm putting the maximum name and population into the max variable. But this pretty much says I already parsed the header. That means as soon as it gets here, that means we already parsed the header and so on. Okay, so that tells me that this city with the max population name is New York. Okay, so this is how you would open up a file. You would start reading the contents and you would parse the contents. Okay. Any questions so far?
No, we are good.
Okay, good. Right, so that is how you would open up a file and read the contents of the file. Right now, there is another framework. Well, before we go to frameworks, so this is what a CSV file, right? Now let's say that there is some city with a comma in the name. Okay, so let's say that there is some European city, German city. Let's name it something like Ottenberg, and it has a comma in the name, and the population of that city is this. Okay. Now what happens is, okay. Now since I have a comma in the name, so I just came up with this hypothetical name that doesn't exist most probably. So when I try to read this particular data, so let me increase the font here. So when I try to read this particular data in the Python code, and we are pretty much doing a split with a comma, so that gets screwed up. Screwed up in the sense this population is no longer going to be population. It is the second word in this particular line. All right. So how do we take care of this kind of a issue? So CSV format. Most of the comma separated files, they have a special format, which is pretty much they put double quotes whenever it's a string value, and whenever it's an integer value, you don't need to put double quotes. Okay, so this is how CSV files are usually named after. Like you put double quotes around those and so on. Okay. Now, even if I have a double quotes, this comma is going to be still considered as a data, because all the split does is split is looking for a comma, and it's going to find the comma after that first word. Okay, so let me replace this. So let me put this as first and second. Okay. So after this first word, it's going to find the comma, and it's going to tell me this whole thing is a population. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see the highlight, but it's going to tell me that that whole thing is a population. And before the comma, it's going to tell me this is the name of the city. Okay, so if you don't want that, there is a lot of things that you have to do. You have to split based on double quotes, and once you split on double quotes, then you have to look for a comma and all that. Okay, but Python has another tool, which is CSV Reader. Okay, so you can simply say import CSV. Okay, so that's a library that is available in Python, and this helps take care of those kind of weird use cases. That means you might have those commas, double quotes. You might have pretty weird characters in the data and so on. All that is taken care by the CSV Reader. So I'm going to comment this and show you how to use that. All right, so we're going to do csv.reader. Okay, so this reader takes a file name. Okay, so I'm going to. So we are still opening the file for reading mode. Okay, so but this time I'm going to use the CSV Reader. I'm going to say for line in. Okay. All right. It's not line, for row in reader. Okay. I mean, you can call it a line or whatever, and then I'm going to say print row. Okay. So this CSV Reader is pretty smart. What it does is it knows what is the format. That means it knows the double quotes, and the comma is inside the double quotes, so it will ignore. It won't create a special token. So this whole thing, this first and second, will be considered as one, and this will be considered as another one, and so on. Okay. So if I run that, you can see it nicely gives me a list of values. The first one, obviously, it says city population, which is a header information. But look at the last one. So this whole thing is considered as one value, and then I have the next one, the population, as a different value. Okay, so I got a list of these things, and let's say I'm only interested in the second value, and since it's an array, index is 0, so I'm just going to print the population here. Okay. So you can see at the bottom here, it shows up the population, only the second column value. Okay, so now you can have multiple commas in the names. It doesn't matter. Okay, so I can have another comma here, another comma here, maybe a quote there, and all that. Okay, so it doesn't matter how many commas it is there. It's all part of that same string. Okay. So just to rerun that. Okay. So I'm still going to get the same population. Okay. So this is the advantage of using CSV. Okay. And this comes for free in Python. Okay. Now you can see the advantage of using Python. Python has a lot of inbuilt functionality that can help you with reading different kind of data, and it's especially very good with data analysis kind of stuff and so on. Okay. All right. Before I talk about how to write to a file, so far we are looking at how to read from a file. I'm going to tell you how to write to a file. But before I go there, any questions so far? Okay, cool. No questions, and let's move on. All right, so here we did open the file as f. That means we are opening and we are assigning the value to f, right? And when you say open and you don't specify the second parameter, that is usually R. R means reading mode, and hopefully you guys can see this. Yeah, the second parameter, if you don't specify, it's a reading mode. Okay, by default, it's assumed as R. But if you want to open the file in writing mode, so you should say, let's say, out.txt W. Okay, so when I say W, it is writing. I'm opening the file to write to the file. Now I'm not reading from the file. Okay, that's F. Okay, so this time I want to write, let's say, some dummy data. Okay, so F dot write. Line name. So before I print a line 2, let me just print a new line here. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So as you can see on the left side, we show you this project folders here. Okay, that's fine. So I don't have a file called out.txt as of now so far. So if I go to file and say open, so you can see there is no, there's no file called out.txt here. So now I'm going to, when I run this code, it's going to create a file called out.txt, and that is pretty much the behavior. If you're trying to write to a file, and if the file does not exist, it's going to create the file, and it's going to write to that file. Okay. So I'm going to run. So I just ran this code. Okay. So I'm going to go to this particular location, which is all right. So if I go to this particular location, there should be a file called out.txt. Okay. As expected, there's a file called out.txt. So I'm going to say OK and open that. And you can see here, there are 2 lines here. Okay. So that is as simple as 3 lines of code. If you want to write to a file, you open up in the writing mode, and then you say print or write, and it will write to that file. Okay. Now, same thing. If you want to write as a comma separator file, you can write those values also. Okay. So let's say I want to write from 1 to 10 in a comma separator values or whatever. Okay. So for I range 1 to 11, and I'm going to write, let's say, so this notation, maybe you remember from the previous session, these are called format strings. When you put F, these are called format. And anything you put in curly parentheses, that is going to be evaluated. So in this case, I is going to be evaluated, and it's printing two values. One is I and the square of I. Okay, so those are the 2 values that are printed there. I'm going to remove this. Okay. So when I run this, you're going to see that. Okay, so I ran this code just now. And if I go to out.txt, you're going to see that there are 10 lines with the number and the square of that number, okay? Because that is what we have returned to the file, I and I times I, which is a square, okay? But notice that the previous contents of the file are gone. Gone means it is going to overwrite whatever the previous values are there, okay? So this option that you provide as a W, so whenever you say you want to open the file in writing mode, if the file does not exist, it's going to create the file. But if the file exists, it's going to overwrite those contents with the new contents, okay? But if you want to keep the old contents and you want to add to the end of the file, you have to open the file in append mode. Okay, append is A, so you have to open the file in append mode. And what that does is, if the file already exists, it's not going to clear the contents, but it's going to add to the end of the file. Okay? So here I'm going to start from maybe 10 and go all the way to 15. Okay, and I'm going to do this. Okay, so I just ran the code, and if I go to the file here, and you can see it added a few more lines at the bottom, which is pretty much the new lines. The old content is still there, and it added to the bottom of that file. Okay, so whenever you say open the file in append mode, that's going to add to the end of the file. And if you say W mode, it's going to override those contents. Okay. All right, so that is the width, which is resource manager, and how to read from a file, write to a file, and all that. Okay, so you have CSV Reader. Similarly, you have a CSV Writer also. Okay, so you can open the file, and I can say CSV.writer. Okay, and I can just say writer.write. I think it is write row or something like that, but let's do this writer.write. And it takes a list of values. So I'm going to give it I and I times I. Okay, so let's try this. And here I'm going to probably leave it in the append mode. So in the bottom it's going to append. No attribute right. I think it's right lines. Okay, let me just quickly look up. So PyCharm is supposed to automatically populate the function, but it's not doing that. So let's run this right row or right line. And again, you don't have to remember all the functions. You can look up on the Google or anywhere. So let me just quickly look up the name of the function write row. Okay, so write row is the method. Okay. All right, so you can see that it ran successfully, and I appended the same lines, which is 10 and 10 to 15, all the lines. And if I go to the CSV file, you can see it actually appended an extra line there. Okay. So now let's try to see why it appended an extra line. And if I go back to the Python code, okay, write row adds a row, and it also prints a new line. Yeah, there is an option not to print an extra line. Let's see. You can do multiple rows. So let's do 5 rows. Okay, that's fine. For now, let's ignore this. Let's try this actually. 5 row. Yep, it takes exactly a list of values. Okay, for now ignore it, but CSV Writer is also the same thing. That means, let's say you have a data. So let's say I have something called, name equal to, okay. So let me write a couple of rows here. Okay, so let's do this. Writer.write row, and I'm going to say ABC and DEF. So those are the 2 columns that I'm writing there. And I have another which is let's say XYZ and ABC. Okay, so I have 2 rows here. So I'm just writing those 2 rows, and if I run this code, so it runs successfully, and I'm going to the CSV file, and at the bottom you can see it did something very interesting. Okay, so you can see that for the first row, it doesn't put the double quotes. Okay, because you don't have to put double quotes because there is no comma inside the data. Okay, but for the second row, I have a comma inside the data, so it's going to put double quotes around that. Okay, so this is the advantage of using CSV module, that it can take care of it knows exactly where the comma is, what are the issues that might happen if you don't put double quotes and all that. So it takes care of all those things. Okay. All right. So that is CSV module, how to read a CSV file, how to write your file. And if you don't want to use CSV Reader Writer, you can write your own code. You can take the line, you can split it, and then you can pretty much loop through it and all that stuff. Okay. All right. So those are the few stuff there. And let's move on to classes. Okay. So let's say objects, object-oriented programming in Python. Okay. So this is very important because Python supports objects, and if you're into unit testing or Python development, or even if you're a DevOps person, you need to write some objects which take care of certain functionality and so on. Okay, so let's say I have a class. Class is nothing but an object. Okay, so far we were looking at simple stuff like integers, numbers, strings, and so on. Okay, so what if I have an object which is of type employee? Okay, so that is not a simple type, because now I have an employee ID, employee name, maybe employee salary information, and all that. Okay, so now this is a complex type. It's not a simple data type. Okay, so simple data types are pretty much like strings, numbers, even dictionaries, I would say, to some extent. Those are all can be inbuilt methods, inbuilt data types. But these are user-defined data types. That means I'm defining my own object. Okay, so here I have an employee class, and for now I'm just going to say pass. Okay? So in Python, if you put pass means I don't have an implementation. I'm going to come back and implement it later. Okay. All right. So here, and I'm going to say equal to employee. Okay. And if I print type of E, so this type method actually helps me print the type of that particular object. Okay, so that's all I'm doing. So I'm declaring a new object, and I'm defining, let's say, I want to say, yeah, that's fine, E. I'm declaring a new employee of type E, and then I'm printing the type of E. Okay, I'm going to comment the old code. I'm going to run this code. Okay, so what it prints is this. Okay, class employee, main employee, and all that. Okay, so here what it does is it declared an object of type employee, and then I have this instance. This is called an instance of that class, and then I'm printing the type of that instance. Okay, now let's say that each employee has a name, right? So I want to pass a name, something like let's say this person employee name is Mark. Okay, and his age, let's say date of birth. Okay, so let's say there's a date of birth of 01/01/1990. Okay, so let's say that's the date of birth of that particular employee, and then I have an employee 2. Let's say Bob. Okay, and this guy 1980. 1/01/1980. And so I have 2 employees now. So one is the Mark, and the other guy is a Bob. Okay, and we have date of birth, and we have the name and date of birth. Okay, but if you look at the implementation, I haven't implemented that yet. Okay, so let's add this name and data type, which is date of birth. Okay. So when you do underscore init, that is the initialization method, or that's the first method that is called. And here we can do a few things here. Okay, so here I'm getting a name and a date of birth. Okay, so I'm going to say name, comma DOB, and I'm going to say name equal to name, or let's say n to reduce the confusion. I'm going to say n and DOB. Okay, select for the employee DOB equal to DOB. So here I'm declaring an initialization method, and I'm storing that name into that name variable and the date of birth into DOB variable. Okay, let's take this. So if I know that, it's pretty much not going to print anything because we are not printing anything. We are just declaring those objects, and then we are exiting. Okay, so you can see that now I have a complex data type. This data type provides, it can store the name of the employee, date of birth. If I have an employee ID, it can store that ID and so on. And you might ask, what is the advantage of this employee class? I could keep track of the name and date of birth separately. I don't need to declare a separate class as such and so on. Okay, so the advantage is that, let's say you want to figure out what is the age of this employee. Okay, so you can write your custom methods on this now. Okay, so you can say get age. Okay, and since you know what is the employee's date of birth, you can get the age of the employee. Okay, so you can say something like date time. Okay, time dot now minus the date of birth of the employee. Okay, so this might look complicated, the data manipulations, but for now, just wait for a minute. I'm going to explain you what the logic does. Okay, so let me try this for a second quickly. And small d. All right, okay. So, all right, so what I have here is I know what is the date of birth of the employee, right? And we can provide an additional method, something like a get age. Okay, so this get age can be, since we know the name, date of birth of the employee, and I know what is the current system date, so I can subtract the system date or current date minus the date of birth, and that gives me the age of the employee. Okay, so here that's exactly what I did. So I took the system date, which is the current date, and I subtracted the employee's date of birth. And the reason of this manipulation is that because I have a date time as a string date time. Okay, so I have a month, day, year. Okay, so I'm converting that to a date time, and I'm doing subtraction and all that, and then I have the return value. Okay, so that's exactly what is happening here. So when I say get me the age of that employee, which is Mark, so this is the age of the employee I got. So his age is 11,555 days, 21 hours, 30 minutes, 50 seconds, 997 milliseconds. Okay, so this is not exactly as you would expect, like 20 years, 30 years, and so on. Now I can take this, I can convert the days, hours into which is human readable, like years, months, and so on. but you get the idea. That the idea is that you can add additional functionality on top of it, which is get me the age, get me the country, or maybe other parameters, which is like, let's say he's located in Europe and you want to convert his salary to US, you can say get me US salary and all that. So you can actually do all those kind of manipulations inside the object itself, okay? So you don't have to write an additional method outside the class. It's all grouped together within that class itself, okay? So that's one advantage of declaring your own object. You're grouping all the functionality together, and then you are pretty much saying, I have an employee, now get me the age of the employee. That's it, okay? You can also do functional style. That means you can, there are other things also, but this is more cleaner approach, okay? All right, if you guys have any questions, feel free to post on the chat or ask. All right, so that's an employee class. And let's say now this is fine. So what other advantages do we have, right? So let's say that I have some method. Let's say I have a new employee that joined my company, okay? Now I want to save that guy or save that information into the database, okay? So let's say I have a new method which is save to DB, okay? So now I can save save the employee information to the database, okay? So I can do something like okay, so we haven't gone to databases yet. Maybe in the next session, I'm going to talk about how to connect to a database, how to pull the information, how to add records to the database. But for now, let's assume that there is this function which can save to, let's say, Oracle database. Okay? And I'm going to say pass. Okay. Pass means I haven't implemented. I'm going to come back implement that later. Okay. All right. So I have that right now. Let's say I have a CEO class, okay? CEO, or maybe some other special class which is contractor, okay, consultant, okay, and most of your consultants, so okay, contractor. Let's call it a contractor. Now the contractor class is also an employee class, but you have additional restrictions and additional things, okay? You may not have the salary per month, but you may have salary per hour and all that, okay? But you still need the same kind of functionality, which is get me the age, save to database, all that kind of functionality is still going to be there, okay? So you don't want to rewrite the same things in a different class. You can derive from that class. Okay? So you can say, now this contractor class is derived from the employee class, okay? Now that means, what it means is whatever is defined here is going to work inside the contractor class also. Okay, so here I'm going to say def init initialization method. All right. Zoom out a little bit. All right, guys. So here, what I have is I declared a different class, which is a contractor class, and that is derived from the base class. The base class is the employee class here, and we derived from there, and then I have derived class. But what that means pretty much is that whatever the functionality is defined in the base class, you're going to get it in the derived class. Okay, that means you're going to get it for free. You don't have to re-implement that functionality and all that. Okay. Now, since this is derived, you may have additional methods, additional functionality in the derived class. So here I have something called per hour wage. That means per hour you might be getting something and so on. That contractor. So that is exactly what we are keeping track of. So we have another variable which is hourly wage, and I'm storing that information in there. Okay. But at the same time, I have to call the base class constructor. And in the base class, I'm setting up what is the name of the employee, what is the date of birth of the employee, and all those things. Okay. But this is in a nutshell. You have something in a base class, and then you have a derived class. You don't have to re-implement all those things in the derived class. You get it for free into the derived class. Okay. So this is the advantage of using object-oriented style. Yeah. A class is an object, and this is a bunch of objects and all that. Okay. So I can declare a contractor.
So here line number 46. So is it a object?
Yeah. So,
and line number 47.
Yep. Yeah. So that what we are doing there is this. Okay. So if you look at the memory structure of those objects, so I'm trying to create a graphical image here. But let's say this is an employee class. Okay. So let's say this is the employee class. Okay. So this is the memory. Let's say there is 10 bytes or 20 bytes. That is the employee class. Okay. And if you look at the contractor class, it's going to be something like this. Okay. So it's going to be on top of it. So it's going to have the employee class. In addition to having the employee class, it's also going to have additional information, which is the contractor class. Okay. So this is going to be the contractor class. So if you look at the memory structure, contractor class is derived from the employee class, but it also has some additional information. Okay. So that is how it looks like. But when you call this contractor class, what is the memory of this guy, employee class? Okay, so you still haven't set up the memory for this employee class. So that is what the line number 46 is doing. What the 46 is doing is I want to set up that employee class, and it's saying go set it up, go set up that memory with this name and date of birth. That's not a separate object. It is the same object.
Okay, yeah, got it. And line number 47, that's we are storing in hourly wage, the
Correct.
per hour wage.
That's correct, yeah. So the name and date of birth is inside the employee class, inside that, and hourly wage is going to be here somewhere. So it's going to be here, okay. And the name and salary is going to be, name and date of birth is going to be here. Okay? Name is going to be there, and date of birth is going to be here somewhere, and so on. But you get the idea, okay. That is a memory of that employee class, and this is contractor class is on top of it. That means you have more information in addition to those information of the employee. So I have to set up the hourly wage, and that's what we are doing on line number 47.
Oh, okay, yeah, got it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. So now let's say I have this right. Now I have an employee class, I have a contractor class. And if I want to define a contractor, I can just say this contractor, and I have to pass all those parameters, which is name, date of birth, per hour wage, and all that. Okay, let's say I have some person called as Rich. Okay, and his date of birth is 0202 2000. let's say 2000. Okay, and his hourly wages, let's say 40. Okay, so that is how I would declare a contractor class, and I can do c dot get age. Okay, and I can do print. Okay, so you can see that the contractor doesn't have an explicitly get age, but the base class has the get age. So the contractor class will get that method also. Okay? Sorry, I think I have to be self here. One second. Okay, I got 3 parameters, and I'm passing 3 parameters here. DOB. Interesting. So in Python 2, they changed to Python 3. In Python 2, we would call something like a super method, super employee dot init name from DOB. And that is what you would do in Python 2. But in Python 3, they changed it to this style. Let me just run it with Python 2 style. Yeah, okay. We type, okay, fine. Okay, let me look it up. Give me 1 second. Okay, all right. Already have it. Okay, so, okay, the first parameter should be self, I guess. Okay, so let's try it. I thought I already tried this. Let's try. Okay, perfect. All right. So the first parameter is self because I guess it also has three parameters over there, which is self, name, DOB. But yeah, anyway, so this is how you would call the base class constructor to construct the base class. So you have to pass the self also there. So the self is a keyword, and what the self means, this particular instance itself, okay, that itself is called self, but it's referencing to itself. Okay, so this might seem confusing, but self means it is referencing itself. Okay, so when I do self.hourly wage, it's pretty much it's referencing to that C class, which is contractor class and all that. Okay. So in the case of Mark, the self will refer to Mark's name, Mark's date of birth, and so on. In the case of Bob, the self will refer to Bob's name and Bob's date of birth and all that. Okay. So that is where the self comes into picture. So this self for this guy will be different for the self for this guy, for the second employee object. Okay. Yeah, for now it might be confusing, but just think you have to put the keyword self there. And using the self, you should be able to access the member variables and all that. Okay. But you can see that here, when we say c.getAge, it actually prints the age of that contractor, and we don't have a getAge inside the contractor class. Okay. So that is defined in the base class, and we get that for free in the derived class. All right. So this is this might be too dry. So let's change the topic here. Any questions so far? All right. All right. So there is something else called as a Jupyter notebook. All right. So this, what this project does is there are some nice features here. So let's say you are working with Python. Okay, so let's say you are doing some data analysis, and you're reading the file, a huge file, maybe like 100 GB file, 200 GB file, and then you're trying to find out, let's say, the maximum population somewhere and so on. And reading the file takes 20 minutes. Let's say you read 100 GB of data, that takes 20 minutes. And then trying to find the maximum may take 2 minutes or 5 minutes. Okay. And let's say there is some logical error. That means you have some bug somewhere or it's failing. So you fix it, you rerun it. But to read the 100 GB of data, it's going to take 20 minutes again, right? So you don't want to, you want to read the file once, and you want to play around with defining the maximum population and all that. Okay. So what the Jupyter Notebook does is it makes it very interactive. Interactive in the sense you load the file once, and then you can play around with what to do with the data and all that. Okay. So let's try to start a new Jupyter Notebook here. Let me send you the link, and maybe you guys can install it too while I install this. I thought this was installed in my system, but looks like it's not. Okay. So you can run this command pip install Jupyter Lab. And pip is a Python package manager. It might take a minute or two, but you guys can install while I'm installing this stuff. If you guys want me to talk about anything else, any other topic, feel free to post it in the chat or send me a message. Probably I can talk about those topics also. But in the next session, we're going to connect to a database. So I might want you to install PostgreSQL or MySQL. I'm going to send you the links in WhatsApp. How to download and install the MySQL database or maybe PostgreSQL. And in the next session, we're going to connect to the database using Python. And we might run some queries, pull the data from database, and maybe some complex queries, how to add the data back to the database and all that. Okay. It's taking some time.
It is installed in mine.
It's installed in yours. You want to share your screen and maybe just a demo? Okay, I think it's enough.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So when you run the Jupyter Lab command, so after you install it, you might need to run this command. You need to run this command to start it up. Jupyter-lab, and that shows up a console or an option like this. Okay, so this is a very interactive Python. So what you can do here is you can launch a console or a notebook. Okay. So we'll go with notebook here. Okay. This is an interactive notebook. Okay. They call it notebook, but yeah. So I'm going to click on this option here. Okay. And it looks something like this. Okay. So on the left side, it shows up all the files in that particular directory and so on. On the right side, it shows a small cell. They call it a cell, but it's similar to Excel cell kind of stuff, where you can enter certain commands. Okay. So if I say print, okay, so this is pretty much a Python statement that I can put in that cell, and I can hit enter, and that is going to execute. Shift enter. So if I hit enter, it's going to create a new line. But if I do shift enter, it's going to execute that line. Okay. And if I say a equal to 10, okay, so let's do that. And then I can say a plus equal to 1. Okay. And I can print the value of a. So here I'm executing something here, or I'm assigning the value of a there. Okay. And then I'm incrementing the value in the next cell, and then I'm printing in the next cell, and so on. Okay. So you can see that it's going to remember the previous cell, and it's going to take whatever the value of the previous cell. Okay. So here I can say with open, let's say I want to open a huge file. Okay. So let's say I say open this results.txt. Okay. So I'm going to open this file called as results.txt. As F. Okay. For line F. So, okay. So here what we are doing is we are making it interactive. Okay. So before I was putting the whole code in the file, and when I ran the Python file, it was going through every line of the Python file and it was executing there. Okay. But when I hit enter here or shift enter, it is only executing this particular block of code. It is not going to execute the previous statements. Okay. So here, let's say I have the lines. I have all the lines of the file. And if I print that, it's going to print the contents of those lines and so on. Okay. Now I can say, give me lines of first row. Okay. Or give me the second row, or yeah, give me the first row and so on. So pretty much now I can make it interactive. Okay. So I can say, let's say I want to split that line. Okay. So now I'm doing it more interactive approach, that I'm not reading the file every time. Okay. So I read it only once, and then I'm trying to experiment with the data. Okay. So I'm making it more interactive. And then once I'm happy with this change, I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it in my actual file, which is a Python file, and then I'm going to proceed further. Okay. So, but if you want to test it out, whether it's going to run fine or not fine, then you can use this interactive Python, and you can test it out. Okay. So the advantage is that anything you put in a cell, it's only going to execute that cell. The previous cells, everything it's going to be in memory, or it's already computed beforehand. So it's not going to recompute those again. And you can also save these contents. Okay. So you can press the save button, and that is going to show up a pop-up, and you can store it as IPNB file. Save notebook as. Okay. So I'm going to save this as demo. Okay. And the next time I can open that interactive Python session, and I'm going to have all these cells here. The first cell, second cell, all these cells are going to be still there. Okay. So it makes it very, I would say, especially for data analysis, you don't want to read huge volume of data and then face some error and then read the data again and again. So you can read it once and then you can experiment with it. So it saves you a lot of time. But I just want to show you guys this tool that's also used quite extensively in a lot of places. So it's called Jupyter Interactive Python, Jupyter Notebook, all that. Okay. All right, guys. Any questions so far? All right. So I think we covered a lot of things here. So we covered classes. We covered how to read files, write to files, CSV Reader, CSV Writer, looked at Humio, Splunk. In the next session, probably we'll continue with the GitHub. There are some permission settings. I have to look at why the permissions are incorrect. But yeah, in the next session, we'll continue with that. We'll also, in the next session, look at databases, how to connect with databases and all that. So with this, I'm going to stop here. But before I let you guys go, I want to give you a small assignment. And this is something you can solve it. Send me a snapshot picture, the actual code file, email, WhatsApp, anything's fine. So this is what I want you guys to do. First, create a CSV file. Or very interestingly, there's a weather data available. So let's go to okay. So there's a data.gov, which is a government website. Okay, so I'm going to that website and CSV. Okay, there's a CSV file here. Okay. Yeah, it looks like a appeals. It's a federal court or city of New York court or so. We don't care about the what. Yeah, so that's fine. So we'll take this public data, and I'm going to open that. So download that data. Okay, I'm going to send you this link also. Download this CSV data. Okay, so that is going to give me. That's fine. So I just downloaded the CSV data, and I'm going to see what are the columns there and all that. Okay, there's going to be a huge file because it is actually all the court cases and all that. Okay, so this is what the data looks like. Okay. So the first one is appeal type, agency, New York Police Department, date filed, and so on. Okay. All right. So this is very interesting data. Okay. So this is a public data. So let's say that you are provided this data. Okay. So I just pasted the links there. So you should be able to download that information and all that. Okay? So let's say you have this as a CSV data. It's all comma separated and everything. Okay. So what I want you to do is the very first step is created, not create, but get the NYPD, New York Police Department data. Okay. Second, read the file. Okay. Third, okay. Find the number of open cases. Find the number of closed cases. Okay. So there's a column called open and closed. Okay. Status. Is the status open, closed, or so on? Okay. So let's say. So it's a very easy program. So you're reading. Yeah, I'm going to let you figure out the logic. But pretty much you're reading the CSV file, and then you are going through line by line, and then you're trying to figure out how many number of cases are closed, how many number of cases are open, and all that. Okay. And I want you to find the oldest case. Okay, so this is going all the way to, I guess, I think it has 2017 information there. Okay, date filed. Okay, so find the oldest. And the fifth one. Yeah, fifth one is create a class for above functionality. Okay, so what that means is you're going to create a class. That class is going to take this file name as a constructor, and it's going to have different methods, something like get me the number of open cases, get me the number of closed cases, get me the oldest case, and all that. Okay, so that's a class, and it's going to have all these different methods. Okay, so pretty easy, pretty straightforward. It should not take more than 1 hour, half an hour. Okay, so you can send me a snapshot, a picture, or maybe the actual code py file, Python file. Anything is fine. Okay. All right, any questions so far?
No, Vasu. It was a good session.
Thanks. Yeah, so we'll continue in the next session. So if you guys have any questions or any concerns, shoot me a message and we can follow up there. Or if you have any other topic of interest, we can follow up on those topics also. All right,
Yep.
guys. So enjoy your weekend. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Also, can you please send me that previous session as well as this session recording? Like, where can I find it out?
Yeah, sure. I'll send you a link, a YouTube link and all that. Yes, definitely.
Okay. Do we have any WhatsApp group or anything? Like, where can I
No, I
get
don't
that
want.
one?
I don't want to create WhatsApp group, but I can. I mean, I'll send you individually. I'll send you that. Yeah.
Okay, because I think you don't have even my email ID. So can I send it to Raj? So.
Oh, you don't have my email? That's fine. You can send me on WhatsApp. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, I'll get your information from Raj then. Okay, yeah, sure.
I am Raj. Okay, that's fine. All right. Thanks.
All right, all right, all right. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.